Okay, today we have a MacBook Air here. This is an A1466 model. This is the early 2015. I'll zoom into the bottom so you can see. Like I said, this is an A1466, which actually ran for several years, I believe from 2012 all the way to 2017 with the MacBook Air. So this tutorial, I guess, will describe the process for that. The customer brought this in because it was given from the business that they worked at. The company went under, so they obtained this laptop, and it has a firmware password on it. So if I try to turn it on here, I believe it has some battery still left on the charge. And we'll take a look to see what it does. When you first turn it on, this is what you get. There are two different types of passwords on a MacBook. There is the firmware password, which is this screen here, and then there's the user password. If you just have a user password, which is where you have like a picture and then you have a sign-in with the wallpaper and all that, that's a login password, which can be removed using different utilities. But this is a firmware password, so we're going to have to modify the EFI firmware chip. And so there's really no way past this easily through software, as far as I know. You'll probably read many places that there are ways to do it, but they're very sketchy, and I've never seen any of those work in the past. Some people will say you can purchase something and give them the serial number, and you'll get like a master code that will work. I've never seen that in practice, so I don't know if that's a thing or not. I would lean towards that's probably a scam. But the way we're going to be doing it is through editing the firmware chip. And so I'm just going to turn it off real quick. And that screen there, you actually cannot get past without that firmware password. So the first thing I'm going to do is shut it down. So I held down the power button right there until it completely went off. And now I'm going to take off the bottom, and we are going to remove the firmware chip, and we're going to edit it using our flash chip reader, and then we're going to modify that portion of the BIOS that stores it, and then we should be good to go. Before we do that, we have to take the bottom of the laptop off, so I'm going to use a P5 pentalobe screwdriver bit. The ones we use are from iFixit, and they are very high quality. And so we are just going to remove the screws and put those off to the side. Now, it is worth noting, if you do have this model, that these two screws here and here are longer than the rest. All the other ones are the same, the short style, but these two are longer than the rest, and those two went in these two top holes there. So keep that in mind when you go to put your screws back in. If you can't get one to fit, don't force it or anything like that. Make sure you have it in the right hole there, and it should be good to go. So I'm not sure what happened to this laptop specifically. It looks like it's suffered some damage or a drop of some sort that caused it to bend. That is pretty common on these MacBook Airs when they're all aluminum like that. I'm just going to lift the bottom cover off. I'm going to put my fingers under here and pull this straight up. I'm going to put that off to the side. So now we're inside of the MacBook here, and I'm just going to inspect it. I see something a little strange here that I don't know what I'm looking at. It looks like there's... I don't know what that is, actually. There is a piece of... It looks like sunglasses, so that's always interesting. First thing you want to do is to do a little inspection, make sure that there's no liquid damage, obviously. Every time you open a laptop, it's always something new. That's probably the first time and probably the last time I'll ever see a piece of somebody's sunglasses in a laptop. But now we actually need to find the firmware chip. So on this model, I believe it is on the other side of the board, so we're going to have to take the motherboard out and flip the board over. Not super difficult on this model. It is a good idea to have a screw organizer, so I'm going to grab that real quick, and then we'll be able to sort our screws. Okay, so now I have our screw organizer here. This is just a magnetic pad that's labeled, just so we know where our screws go. First thing you want to do whenever you take out part of the laptop is disconnect the battery. So on this model it's down here, we just lift up this tab, pull that out, comes out like that. Next thing we're going to want to do is disconnect the wireless antenna wires. These are quite fragile, so be careful when you're pulling them out. We just like to put some pressure underneath, and they should lift straight upwards, just like that. And now we will remove the solid state drive. We're going to switch from a Pentel bit to a T4, a Torx 4 screwdriver, to be able to remove the rest of the screws in the laptop. So I'll take out the solid state drive. And nothing has to be done in any specific order. The wireless card can be left in. I'll disconnect the screen next. But like I said, the order that you do this doesn't particularly matter so much as that you get all the screws removed so you can actually take the board out. I'll take this little sideboard off. This is held in by some tape, so I'll just pull that off. And we'll remove this rubber here. So I can tell that this has probably never been taken apart, which is a good thing. It hasn't been messed with or anything like that, which is always a good sign. I'll take the fan out next, which has 3 screws. They are different, so it's a good idea to keep track of them, or place them in the screw organizer that resembles the location. So in this case, I do something like this, so I know that this is the bottom screw, this is the one on the top right, this is the one on the top left. That's a good idea to keep track of it. You can kind of match it up. So next I'll take out the fan. This is held in by a tiny ribbon cable, so try not to pull up too fast. We have to flip the lever on that right there, and then this should pull straight out just like that. We will remove the connector for the I/O board that has the MagSafe connector on it. Remove that, and then we have this down here, which is the camera wire. We'll go ahead, that also pulls straight out. If you have a pair of tweezers, that would probably be better for this application. Just like that, pulls right out. Now we can start taking out the motherboard screws. So we have 2 here, we have 2 down here, we have 2 here, and there's also one hiding underneath in this corner right down there with the wireless wires above it. That one is a bit of a tricky one, so I'll just start removing the motherboard screws and putting those off to the side. So now so you can see. Motherboard screws, motherboard screws. Screws. So we've got our 6 primary motherboard screws out. And I will also disconnect the speaker, because I forgot to originally do that. That one also pulls straight upwards. And now we should be able to start taking the board out once we get the backlight and keyboard connectors out. So those are just normal flex connectors, so they pull those tabs so that they go straight up. And you can pull those out. I usually actually leave them in until the board comes out, unless you want to take out the battery, because it's difficult to pull those outwards. So I'll just leave them unlatched, and then when I pull the motherboard out, disconnect them as I do that. And then our very last screw here is down where the wireless cables are, actually underneath here. So usually what I have to do is pry this back, pull these up a little bit so that it moves out the way, and then you should be able to get down in there. Now this screw is different from the motherboard screws, so make sure that's off to the side and you know where that went. Now we should be able to lift the motherboard up and out. I'll zoom out so you can see that. Like I said, go very slow. Make sure you have everything unplugged. Now I can actually get to these, so I will just simply pull these out, pry these straight out, and they should come right out just like that. And at this point we have the motherboard removed, just like that. We put the chassis off to the side, and now we want to actually find the chip. So on this model, it is right down here next to the screw hole. It's a WinBond chip. That is very common. You'll see WinBond. There's the MX, whatever the MX chip is. I don't quite remember what brand that is. Mactronics or something similar. Hopefully you can see that there. That chip is what stores the firmware. There's two ways to actually get the password off. The first way is to buy a chip online, and the other way is to flash your current chip with a file, or the better way to do that would be to just remove the password from your existing BIOS. The reason why you want to replace the password on your existing BIOS and not flash one from a file or get one off the internet is because you don't know whether it has a clean management engine region. There's a portion in the firmware chip that stores the management engine settings and configurations for the PCH. I guess in this case it would be a SMC. And a lot of that configuration, if it's with somebody else's laptop's information, it can cause problems, and the computer will act very strange, especially when trying to change chipset functionality, like changing the display brightness and things like that. So it's generally a good idea to, if you don't know whether it's a clean management engine region, edit it and just remove the password, and I'll show you how to do that. That's the route I prefer to take. That way it won't conflict with any of the settings that the SMC and the BIOS have. It won't conflict. So we're going to need to remove that chip there. We use just a generic hot air station. This is a very cheap $30, $40 one from eBay. I don't have a Quick or any of the really high-end ones yet, and I don't have my microscope here. My microscope's at home, so I won't be able to look at it under the microscope, but hopefully you will be able to see. It's a fairly large chip, and it's not that difficult to remove. I'm going to be using a flux pen here to make sure that it's nice and fluxed up. And I will turn on my hot air station, and I will set it to approximately 400 degrees. Ours has a scale of 1 to 8 in terms of its airflow. I usually set it like 3.5 on the scale, so a little less than halfway of maximum airflow, and that will depend on the machine that you have. I also have a pair of tweezers here that I will use to take the chip off with. Just make sure you know that you can get a good grip on the chip there, and you should be fine. So I will go ahead and use the hot air station, and I will, now that it's preheated, I will use the hot air to take the chip off the board, and we will put it into our chip programmer. So I will get the chip removed, and I will be right back. Okay, so now I have the chip removed here. My hot air station was giving me a little bit of trouble keeping the temperature. Like I said, it's nothing special. It's like a $30 one from eBay. So now that we got the chip, I'm going to use the chip programmer that I have here. Just give me one second to pull this out. This is the X-Geku TL8662 Plus. And what's cool about this is you could just buy a bunch of different adapters. This one actually came with a bunch of them. But the adapter you're going to need for this is called a QFN8 adapter. Looks something like this. There's a few different ones. I have one here that's a different style that opens up, get that to focus, that opens up like this and it pushes down on the chip. And there's also this style, which is a little bit cheaper, and it just latches down on it. It's very similar. But either way, we're going to be using one of those adapters. I kind of like this one a little bit better. This one I'm more comfortable using, so I will use this. And it's pretty cool. The way that it works is you just set the chip down in the socket, and pin 1 is labeled on this side, so you want to make sure pin 1 is on that side there. And so I will do that, and the way you'll know which side is pin 1 is by the markings on the chip. The chip has a little dot to indicate where pin 1 is. So you want to line that up with pin 1 on the chip with pin 1 on the adapter. And once I have that in there just like that, I can push down on that and then set this in. Now this also has pin number 1 labeled at the top here. So pin 1 we want to make sure is going something like this. And in this case it's a bit difficult to latch it down. So we'll do just like that. And now we will plug in the USB into the computer. And I will switch over to the desktop. So now we're in the XG program. We're going to want to do select and then do a 25 flash detect, and we hit detect on there. It'll say which device do we want to use, and we'll just pick the one that corresponds to the chip. The name of it should be on it. This one is a W25Q64FV, so we'll go ahead and choose the WSON because that is the package that chip is. So we'll go ahead and select that. And now we want to read the firmware, so we'll go ahead and hit read at the top and hit read, and this will read the flash and put it into memory in the program, and that will allow us to actually edit it from there. So you can see here it's currently reading the flash, and when that's finished we will save it. Okay, so read finished. Now I usually like to verify, so I go up to device and hit verify. And what this will do is it will read the flash again, and it will compare it to what is in the program and make sure that they both of those two align, and that will make sure that it is actually verified and that what we have stored is correct from the chip before we modify it. So verify finished, we get it back, and now we're going to save the file. So go to File Save. It'll save it to whatever the default folder is, so we'll call this an MBP or MBA for MacBook Air in front of it. And save this to whatever location you want as default buffer. Make sure it's a bin file, and we can save it. So that's been saved. Now we're going to want to go to a program called HXD, and again both of these links will be in the description. So we will open HXD now. HXD, and it is a portable program. So here we are in HXD, and I want to open that file that we were just talking about. So it was MBA, this is the file that we saved. I'll open it up there, and what we're going to look for is SVS. That is an ASCII letters. Obviously, it's not hexadecimal, so we want to search for that in all directions, and there's going to be two main instances of it. It does start with a $sign, so I should actually put that in there. And so here's the first instance of $SVS. And this is the portion of the BIOS we want to overwrite. This actually stores all the password information, so we want to override that with Fs, which is the same that's above it, including the SVS. So we will select from the beginning of the $sign all the way down until the rest of the Fs start. So we'll just do this entire portion all the way down to where FFF is. We want to right click this, and we want to fill the selection. We want to replace it with FF. And that replaces all of that with FF. Now we can save that file, go back to XG Pro, we can open the file, which is in our local disk, XG Pro, user data, and this is the one we just edited right now. So I'll click on that, hit OK. I can search for, make sure that SVS is not there anymore for the, this is the second instance, which is fine, so the first instance is gone because it immediately jumped down to the bottom of the file. So now we can program that chip in. So we'll hit program at the top and hit program. That will erase the chip and put the new firmware on there. And after that we can resolder it and then we should be good to go. So we will wait for that to finish and I will clean the existing flux off of the board while we wait. So that way we won't have any problems. Alright, so that chip is programmed successfully, so now we can take it out of the adapter and put it back in the computer. This actually verifies for us, so we don't really need to do anything to verify it again. I'll just disconnect the programmer from the computer. Now we can take the chip out. This can kind of be difficult sometimes. I'll switch cameras so you can see. The way I usually do it is just push down from one of the sides, and you should be able to lift the chip up just like that, and take it out. And we actually have to put it back in the motherboard, just like that, and make sure you keep track of the original orientation. I know from doing it so many times that it goes in just like that with the WinBond logo facing me so I can actually read it. So I'll put down some flux and we should be good to go. Just a tiny bit should go a long way on this. And I can preheat the board, and we should be good to go. So I'll just solder that down, and then we should be good. Heat the board up, wait for the soldering, the heat gun to actually preheat. Take a few minutes. There it goes, just kick back on. Do is set it to 4.5 airflow. And we'll set this down, preheat the board a bit. Chip back up and then we should be good to go. Okay, now that that chip has been soldered back on, we can put the motherboard back in the case, and then we will be able to actually test it. Okay, so I just went ahead and put the laptop all back together to the point where we can actually test it, and the battery is in. So I'll open the laptop and turn it on, and we should not see that firmware password screen anymore. We should get a question mark folder, or if there is an operating system, then it should load right into the operating system. We do have fan spin here, so it looks like the computer is turning on. We'll wait to see if we get anything on the display. We should get the question mark folder or the Apple logo, and at that point we can say for sure that the firmware password is gone. So we'll just wait for that to show up. It might take a little bit to actually appear, but it should come up momentarily. And there we go. So we have the question mark folder and that tells us that we have successfully removed the firmware password. So if you have any questions or any issues doing this, leave a comment. Otherwise, the links to all of the programs and the name of the tools that I used today will be in the description as well. Feel free, like I said, to ask any questions. Don't forget to subscribe and check out some of our other videos.